I am now going to mute everyone, which makes me feel very powerful. So everyone is muted. In the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you will have a button which says reactions. If you press that button, you can see you can raise your hand. Given that we've got so many people in the meeting, if you want to say anything, if you want to ask a question later on, then that is ideally what you should do. You can wave at me, but we've got 3 separate screens now of people, so I can't guarantee to see you, but I will do my very best. So, welcome you all. I think this is possibly the biggest Zoom meeting that Road Parish Council has run. It's unfortunate we have to have these meetings on Zoom because it means that there are quite a number of people who aren't able to join the meeting, either through an unwillingness to try these new technologies or not being able to afford these new technologies. But we have promoted this meeting as widely as possible to try and encourage as many people to come into the meeting as we possibly can. The meeting was initially set up by Simon Steele Perkins with Andy Fussell to brief the Parish Council. Parish Council meetings are open to the public, and so we've invited parishioners to take part. And so the plan is that we will get a briefing session from Andy and Simon. Then the Parish Council will ask any questions that they have, and then it will be open to parishioners to ask questions as well. The meeting has obviously been prompted by the very recent submission of a much awaited planning application. We have been forewarned it was going to be coming for 49 housing units on Barbara's Field and Brown's Ground. Of course, as we all know, this is not the first planning application we've had recently. We've had the Mead application for 29 houses. We understand that the Mead application is awaiting the outcome of the government inspector's report into his initial findings on the Mendip Local Plan Part 2. So that might be delayed somewhat. We do think that we may hear something back from the inspector in the next 10 days or so. Simon Steele Perkins might be able to give us some sort of update. He might be better informed than me. But it's important to stress, and it has been stressed many times, we're not picking between 2 applications. Each application, and this has been confirmed again today by Mendip, will be considered in its own right and on its own merits. And as I've long feared, there's very much the possibility that we could end up with both applications being approved. And that's partly because Mendip has no longer got a 5-year housing land supply. And so decisions on planning applications are made very much under the guidance of MPPF rules, and they tend to favour development. So that's the situation we're facing. And it's also worth noting that we're not alone in this. Both Beckington and Norton are 2 neighbour parishes. They're also in a similar situation with planning applications on the table. And it's interesting to note that both of those parishes have exceeded their 2029 target. The so-called target is now actually a minimum, even more than Road has. I'm well aware, having been involved myself in protesting about planning applications over the years, that planning applications do generate very strong, very understandably strong emotions. I think I have to compliment parishioners on the Zoom meetings I was running during the Mead discussions for the way that they behaved. We are governed, as this is a parish council meeting, by the code of conduct of the parish council, which basically says you have to respect other people's point of view, even though you may choose to disagree with it. And I'm sure that will be understood this evening. I'm well aware that probably most of the people, most of the parishioners on the Zoom call this evening have expressed strong objections already to the parish council about this planning application. This meeting isn't about expressing objections. This meeting is a briefing session. What the parish council is proposing to do is next week, next Thursday, to hold a public meeting where everyone will be invited to come and express their views. We may have to put a time limit on people's contribution, but we want to hear what people have to say. It's your opportunity to tell parish councillors what your view is, whereas the meeting today is your opportunity and the parish council's opportunity to hear from the people who put the planning application in, why it's in the form that it is and the rationale behind it. But next week on Thursday, there will be a public meeting, which will be ahead of a specially convened parish council meeting the following Tuesday, when the parish council, in a meeting which will be open to the public, but in the parish council meeting itself, parish councillors will take a decision on their stance in relation to this application for Brownsground and Barboursfield. We then have until just after our March meeting to prepare any papers, any evidence, any argument that we want to send to Mendip Planning Board. It is the Mendip Planning Board which will determine the outcome of this planning application. Road Parish Council is a consultee. It can express an opinion which is given considerable weight, but there are other considerations that the Mendip Planning Board makes, and so there's no certainty that if we oppose a planning application that necessarily the Mendip Planning Board will go along with that. We are dialoguing very closely with our district councillor, Barbie Lund, who's very conscientious district councillor. I think we may also have Linda Oliver, who is the county councillor, and it will be the county council which will look at any road and highway issues in relation to this development, and will pass their judgment on to the Mendip Planning Board to input into their decision-making process. So there will be every opportunity next week for a very open and full-ranging discussion and for arguments to be made. For this meeting, I would ask that we're primarily seeking information and clarification, so it's a question and answer meeting rather than a particularly discursive meeting. So I think that's enough for me. I'm going to hand over to Simon and Andy. If they unmute themselves, we can go forward.
Thank you, Peter. Shall I kick off, Andy?
Yeah.
Thank you. So, well, yeah, firstly, thank you very much, everybody, and to the Parish Council for inviting us along to this meeting. as Peter said, the planning application has been submitted within the last couple of weeks, and is now a live application. That's important for us in particular because it's really the only way actually that we can get some really good feedback from a lot of the consultees. We can talk obviously to all of you and to the Parish Council, and we can talk to specialist officers at Mendip and at Somerset County Council, but most of them, particularly the technical people, generally won't really engage with us, not unreasonably, until the planning application is submitted. So what I think, I mention that because there is a lot of technical information that's supporting this planning application, some of which we'll touch on. And the target for a lot of the technical detail are those specialist officers, and they will be going through all of those documents to check that they agree with our own specialist consultants' findings. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. If they don't, then there'll be a discussion about whether further work needs to be done or whether anything needs to be changed. But I would suggest, I mean, Andy and I will be very happy to try, but where there are very detailed technical questions, then it may be we simply need to refer you to the, to the experts at either Mendip or the Environment Agency or the Drainage Authority or Somerset County Council. But we'll have a go. And as I hope many of you will remember from the presentation we gave last summer at the Pavilion. I don't know how many of you were there, but I hope a few at least. You'll know that we try to be very open and honest and straightforward about these things. And I hope you'll find the same again this evening. Again, I don't think there's much merit in me spending hours talking through the detail of the planning application. I have to make some assumptions here that everybody knows what bits of land we're talking about, Barbara's Field and Brown's Ground. If anybody doesn't know where we are and what we're talking about, then you need to press your button and tell Peter pretty quickly, and we can try and clarify that. But I'm going to assume that you do. I'm also going to assume that you saw some of the plans that we circulated last year, which are to all intents and purposes the same as the ones that we've now submitted. So I'm hoping that everybody is broadly familiar with the master plan and the overall the general thrust of what the proposals are. But in a nutshell, the two fields together cover about 14 acres, of which we are proposing development on about half. So that's about 7 acres on Barbara's Field, and the housing on there would comprise 45 dwellings. The extra 4, because the application is for 49, the extra 4 are detached dwellings on Church Lane. So of that 49, we know that the Mendip policy requires us to deliver 30% of those as affordable houses, and those are affordable as defined in the MPPF and as defined in Mendip's own local plan, as being secured for the benefit of local people in need of housing. There's a cascade mechanism which protects that in perpetuity for the benefit of people in the parish. If there's no one in the parish, then it goes out to the next parish, etc. So that is the one of the most significant, most substantial, most valuable benefits of any housing scheme that delivers affordable housing. Something which Mendip District Council across the board has, and I don't mean this in a critical way, but it has failed to deliver the need by some margin, not just of market housing or housing across the board, but affordable housing particularly. And that is a problem, not just in Mendip, but pretty much across the country. we have failed, I'm afraid, to deliver the housing that's needed. There's also an element of age-restricted housing within that. So we've got 15 age-restricted, and they'll be, sometimes they might be called sheltered housing. They would be limited by planning condition, and almost certainly would be developed as a separate unit within the scheme. Andy and I have talked to a firm called Blue Cedar Homes, who specialise in this. You can look them up and see what they do, but they provide high quality homes for the elderly, and that can include bungalows as well, of course, which if you've trawled through the reams of paper that we submitted, you'll see there's strong reference to bungalows. So that's the development aspect of it. In addition to that, there's a lot of public open space, there's formal open space, play areas, etc., all in accordance with Mendip's policy. And there's also, of course, the change of use, effectively, of Brown's ground from agricultural land to a community area. And the indicative plan shows orchards, it could be willow plantations, allotments, etc. But importantly, it's land which will be freely available and accessible to the general public, which of course that field isn't at the moment, apart from the public footpath. So, so that's the application. It's been a long time coming. I think Peter used those words. You know, we've been talking to the parish council on and off for the last 10 years, probably, Andy, I suspect, about this.
Yeah.
And
it's not been an off the cuff application. It's something we were, like you say, looking at for a long time.
So it's been a long time in gestation, and over that period of time, of course, we've learned a lot about the wishes, the needs. We've been through, you know, before, during, and after the neighbourhood plan of the parish. Originally, for example, the scheme included a care home, which we've dropped now in favour of the sheltered housing. And so we like to think that we've taken on board all of that feedback over the many years as best as we possibly can. As Peter said, that unfortunately doesn't mean to say that everybody's going to support it. And we recognise that a lot of people don't want any new homes, full stop. A lot of people don't want any new homes near them. And that's just that's the world we live in. But we have put forward what we believe to be a robust, a technically sound, and actually a scheme which, if one can, and I'm not saying it's easy, but if one can try and be objective and stand back and think about, if we've got to have some housing in road, a scheme which will deliver some real benefits as well. So so I think that's probably all I need to say at the moment. If you want to add anything, Andy?
No, it was just that one of the points that was made from all those years was that a lot of the bad points about developing in the area was that Brown's ground would have houses on it. And so it was always deemed then that that was an area that would be or should be somewhere that was left alone to create, if possible, a village green in the middle of the village. So it was something that's been pushed at me personally quite a lot, in that nobody would want anything to happen to that area. So the whole thing ties in very much, as you've just said, with the ability to then create or leave Brown's ground in perpetuity in the, you know, under the guidance of the parish council and owned by them as well. So that's about it from me for a minute.
Okay. Well, as this was a briefing initially just for the parish council, can I invite any parish councillors to unmute themselves if they have a question they would, or an issue that they want to put to Andy and Simon? Maybe they don't.
Yeah, we got one.
Oh, thank you.
Guys,
Michael.
can I just ask a quick question for clarification? Obviously, we've got the church farm development now coming towards the end of its development scale. Can I ask how many of those houses, as a percentage, if you know it, have been sold to either A, road residents, or B, Mendip residents? And of the affordable housing that presumably, and I'm sorry, this predates me being on the council, of the affordable housing that's associated with that development, again, how many have gone to locals as opposed to people from a bit further afield? I'm just trying to get a feeling here, not swayed at the moment one way or the other, in terms of, you know, you're obviously selling the fact that there's affordable housing there, there's housing for the elderly, which have been identified through the village neighbourhood plans. But are those houses, once they're being made available to local residents, are they actually being taken up by local residents?
I think I can answer some of that, Mike, but I don't know the details with regards to what Autograph have sorted with regards to the affordable housing, but they're just, affordable tends to get built right at the end. There's some of the cottages along the high street that have gone. Who they've gone to, I don't actually know. I know some residents, and they're now starting to build in on the entrance on the right-hand side. They are now starting to build out the last part of the development, which is the affordable part of it. And as far as I'm aware, that all of that building or buildings has now been taken by the company that will be administering that affordable housing. That's as much detail as I know, but it will be and is, as far as I'm aware, taken care of. But I don't know who it's gone to, as in what residents. Also talking to Autograph, because I've had quite a lot, obviously, to do with them. They obviously, as you know, bought the site from Ashford, so they inherited their obligations. I've met one or two of the residents. I've met quite a lot of the residents, actually. They the people I've met have mostly come from in the parish, as far as I'm aware, that I've met. Some are working in the village now. There's a Bath rugby player that I've met. He's got a young wife with him, so they're planning to stay. There's a young lad across the road, came from Bath into one of two-bedroom houses, and he's buying to create a family. So they're looking to set up a family, and Nick couldn't get into road unless there was the development was there. So he's done that. Two or three other couples are not of a young age, but they're not old. They're middle-aged. They've also come from, one was Keynsham, I think, and one was Bath again. So they've come to road because they're still working, they're still contributing, but they don't want to be in a built-up area. That's only the people I've met. So, but all are very happy with all are very happy with what they've bought. There's a big family. I know there's a big family that have bought the big house in the middle, and they're moving the whole family, grandfather, grandmother, the whole lot. But where they came from, I'm afraid I don't know. But certainly,
can I just add that I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know. I'm not sure anybody would really. I suppose Autograph would probably know, but I'm not sure they would be able to disclose that because of the data protection rules. But all I do know is that the Section 106 agreement, which we signed and Andy signed, had the same cascade mechanism in it for the affordable housing element. And so the affordable housing will have been, I'm almost certain, would have been offered to residents with a connection or a lived-in road as a starting point. So so we can be confident of that. But where the rest of them come from, I don't know. I mean, I suppose it would be interesting. It would be an interesting piece of work to see where any houses that are put up for sale in road, whether they're new ones or old ones, who buys them. I don't know, but people free to come and go, aren't they?
They have, I think, as of yesterday, they are completely sold. I think every plot, might be one left, but every plot has now gone.
If I could just interject here, I mean, this was an issue which came up in the inspectors' hearings, and there is little doubt that the houses in Norton and Beckington and Road tend overwhelmingly to go to people not in Mendip but outside of Mendip, and Autograph did actually have to ask permission via the parish council to offer the social housing, the affordable housing. They certainly did offer it in Road and they offered it in Mendip, but they didn't have any takers, so they did end up having to offer it elsewhere. It still answers a housing need, but the argument, it formed the basis of an argument we put to the inspector that we shouldn't be getting any more of the 500 houses he was looking at. But I think the good thing about Autograph is that the houses that they've built seem to have delighted the residents who've so far moved in, which is good news. Any more issues from parish councillors? Your hand is still up, Mike, but okay, nobody else. We've lost Elaine. She's just phoned to say that her internet went down. We've heard that story before. So should we go to residents? And as I said, we're not looking for arguments to be made, but for issues and questions and challenges to be put. So would anybody like to ideally digitally signal or wave at me? I can see 16 faces at any one time. Or if I can't see anybody, would anybody who would like to ask a question unmute themselves and one at a time ask a question? John. Julia, you go first.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay. So I've looked through a few of the documents, like the main kind of like planning documents. Obviously, being a gardener, I'm interested in the size of the garden. So in the document, it says there'll be generous gardens, but I couldn't find anywhere that stipulated the size. So obviously you've got different size housing. So I would assume that the gardens would relate to the size of the housing, but just if we can get like a ballpark kind of size of like a 2-bed house, what's the size of the garden up to the kind of 5-bed houses? So that's my first question.
I'm gonna dodge that one, but I will. What I should have said at the beginning, if I may, is that if there are questions which I can't answer now, but which might take a bit of wading through documents and coming back to you, then I'll send those back to Peter. I'll send the answers back to Peter, and he can forward that through to anybody who wants it. The simple answer to that is that this is an outline planning application, and so whilst we have shown an indicative master plan that shows a layout as to how the site could be developed, we haven't plotted the detail of the houses, house types, garden sizes, and all the rest of it. So actually, even if I was to measure off the garden sizes of the plans that are submitted, they might change during the course of the reserve matters application. All I can say is that the overall density of the site is on the relatively low side, which means that the gardens will be relatively big. But if you don't mind, and I don't have that figure to hand, but I will send an email to Peter in the morning with the garden sizes as shown on our plan, because we can scale that off.
Yeah.
Would it be, Simon, would it be diligent to just go through how the application, how it goes from here, being outlined, followed by reserve matters, followed by, and how it will manifest itself? Does everybody know how that fits in, and how the relevant agreements have to slide into that, do you think?
Yeah, I can do that quickly. So as I said, our application is an outline planning application. There's two types of planning application. An outline, as we've submitted, which is applying essentially for the principle of development. And you'll see on the forms we've ticked for all matters reserved apart from access. So we are applying for the detail of the access, and that's pretty common for this type of scheme. If we were to get planning permission, we would, however, need to sign a Section 106 planning agreement, which is a legally binding document which binds the land to the delivery of various planning obligations. And that includes the affordable housing, the open space, travel plans, all sorts of other things, which then binds the site effectively. And so when a developer then comes along and submits his the more detailed plans pursuant to that outline application, he then is bound by the terms of that Section 106 agreement. The other way to do it is to submit at the outset a full planning application, and that would include all of the details of the houses, the windows, the slates, the precise garden configurations, and all the rest of it. It still have the same Section 106 agreement, but of course we are a promoter and not a developer. So for us to do that, it doesn't make sense. Promoters deliver about half of the housing sites across the country, so it's a very common way to process this kind of application. And as Andy says, the chosen developer will go through their own application process to submit those detailed plans, and that itself would be the subject of further consultation with the parish council and with all of the other technical consultees that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I just wanted to, because it's not just to get everybody to understand that it's not just we put the application and whatever we've said on there will be, you know, because we haven't put that detail in. It was just to get people to understand there's a lot more process to get through. But me as the land seller and Simon as the promoter, by doing the 106, we can bind that land and therefore produce an agreement that the developer will have to stick to as a basic.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Robin.
Yeah, hi. As people might know, I live at Clay Lane House, which is a heritage Grade 2 listed property adjoining Barbers Field. And I was wondering if developers could explain to me why the importance of the heritage site that I live on is not in their report on heritage aspects that surround the site. My property's missing off that list of heritage sites, and I'm a bit upset by that, actually, because I've got a legal responsibility to maintain this house to a certain standard, and a lot of this property is put up with a lot of impact from developments of church fields, sportsmen, and it did do damage to my property. I've got now a worry what's going to happen with Barbersfield, where pole driving is bound to happen, and we're on very shallow foundations. And so, yeah, I'm very concerned and upset that actually nobody's come to see me and ask, you know, what are my difficulties with this site from the developer's point of view? That's all I want to say.
Thank you. I can answer that very quickly. The application is supported by a heritage impact assessment undertaken by a specialist team who have looked at all of the impact of the development on all of the items of interest from a heritage point of view around the site. And they have, if you read that, you'll find that the your house number 16 is specifically assessed in there. So it is in there.
I'm not number 16. What does that mean, 16?
What's your house called?
Clay Lane House in Clay Lane?
Yeah, so if you look in that report at Appendix 1, you'll see it's been assessed. So
it's on an independent report, is it? I see that 2 properties have been mentioned, and one is down Church Lane, opposite Nuts Lane.
Read the heritage assessment, and if you think we got it wrong, let us know. But it's been assessed, and it's all in there.
Okay.
Okay, Linda Oliver, our county councillor, has got an issue to raise.
Well, it's a question. Hi, can you hear me, Peter?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah. It was very interesting because my question is relating to why it's an outline application and not a full application. I mean, there's lots of reports that's submitted with this that would normally come with a full application. And what an outline application does, it doesn't give any real certainty other than the Section 106 agreement, what a developer would do with the site once they purchased it, because they could change the layout because it's not fixed, which means any support of this application supports the principle of development, but without knowing what the final outcome is going to be, because the promoter and the seller can have a view, but the new developer might have a different view. So I would like to understand, and I'm sure the people would, why it's not a full application, which gives a bit more detail of the housing type, the mix and everything else, which in reserve matters can be changed. So no certainty really, other than a commitment to the Section 106, which is pretty normal. And I don't think it is normal for applications of this type to be outlined, because quite often they're full. There's evidence of that in Norton St Philip and in Beckington. So I think an explanation of why it's not would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's not because for me to make a full application would effectively prejudge which developer was going to be taking the site on. And clearly that wouldn't make any sense for me to do that. As I said, half the sites in the nationally are delivered by promoters, and they will almost exclusively be by way of an outline planning applications and planning permissions. If a house builder was working with Andy, then you might have a full application in front of you, but I suspect not anyway, because there's a huge, it's probably double the amount of investment to work up a full application. I understand the points about certainty, and the assurance that I can give you in that regard is that even an outline application will be linked, will be accompanied by an outline permission, will be accompanied by a series of planning conditions, which will link back to the original, to our master plan, and to all of the accompanying documents. So actually, the reserve matters application, the details scheme, will be very closely guided by and constrained by all of those plans and technical reports which we've submitted, and on all of the schemes that I've done, and when we then sell them on, and the same applies to Church Farm. That was an outline, and the developers come along. They often use the same architects that we've used, and they proceed with their reserve matters applications, and they look to all intents and purposes, they look the same as the indicative scheme that we submitted. And that's because that, you know, a lot of the detailed work behind the scenes has been done. It's just, it's not, you know, it's not generally submitted with the outline, the house type sizes and the garden sizes, which is why I can give you that figure. But that's not something that would normally be specified in an outline stage. It is possible to go one step further and to have design briefs also conditioned at outline stage. I've done that on other sites.
We did that on. I think we did a bit of that on Church Farm, Simon, didn't we?
Yeah, which can again, it can narrow down the areas for further kind of negotiation or movement later on. And if you have a look at the design and access statement that we've submitted, it is incredibly detailed. There's almost as much detail in there as there would be with a full application. The only things we haven't specified is, you know, the precise tile types, windows and front doors, the mix of housing, the type of housing, the height of housing. It's all in there. So so that's what we've done, and that's why we've done it. Yes, you're absolutely right that, you know, there are two ways of doing these things, but it's not uncommon. I would suggest.
I think also, Linda, I think you were involved. Yes, you were involved with Church Farm. You will know from that it was an outline planning that we did in that one with what was then sold to Ashford. They very minutely changed some of the orientation of the houses, but it was what has actually been built, and even by autograph has manifested itself in not a lot of difference from what we submitted as outline planning, because the houses have to be fitted in such a way that they fit. And we want to make sure when we do an outline planning that the correct type of house can be fitted in the right numbers. So it will alter slightly on, I would presume, on whatever developer would buy it, but not an awful lot of that layout will change. And certainly if we stipulate there are a certain amount of houses of a certain configuration, that will stay in there. And if I'm right, Simon, they can't change the amounts of types of houses, can they?
Well, it can all,
unless they go back to planning.
Yeah, that's right. That will all be conditioned, and the mix. I mean, for example, the mix of the affordable housing down to the house types and the sizes of those is very often specified in the Section 106 agreement. So there's no room for manoeuvre on the mix, tenure or size of those. The only thing that will change, or the only thing that gets clarified, is the elevation. You know, the elevational treatment, the physical appearance of the houses themselves, which you know, as you've seen from what Autograph have done, there's no reason to assume that that this will be anything other than, you know, first rate development of the highest quality. That's what we want to achieve. That's what Andy wants to achieve, and I've no doubt that's what you would all want, assuming it was to go ahead.
Does that answer the question, Linda?
Thanks, Andy. It does a bit, but I mean, the Church Farm site, I wasn't involved from the start because I wasn't even elected then, but
no.
After that. But I mean, it was a brownfield site. This is slightly different. And you know, I am sure, unless I'm totally mistaken, the indication from previous meetings was it was going to be a full application with lots of detail. And I think, you know, there is like a 5-year supply that changes things, but I think people would prefer a bit more certainty and know what they're going to get and who they're going to get it from. Because you have talked before about working with a more bespoke developer rather than a Barratt type developer. You know, forgive me for mentioning Barratt, but there's no certainty who you will sell that land to. And I suppose the concern is it will go to the highest bidder and they might get a completely different density on the site because people want to make more profit and put smaller houses on. And I think it's that bothers me a bit. And I'm sure other people, but thanks anyway, Andy.
So, yeah, they can't, what they can't do, Linda, is change the density once we have the outline planning. With Autograph, no, not with Autograph, but with Ashford, they weren't the people that paid the most money when I did that with them. They were by no means the people that paid the most money. And what I did was I actively went to people that I thought would do a reasonable job when it came to delivering it, and being obviously I did the buying and the selling of the land. Simon would have done that had I not stipulated that it was, you know, it's my life on the line, if you like. And it was very much of a big concern to me that I got the right developer in there. I couldn't control the fact that it was sold on, but I did have the ability to be included when he was selling it, and so I got to meet Autograph before they bought it, and I was very impressed with what they did. So I didn't have any concern with the people that were building it. I can guarantee that it probably would not be a major house builder. It's my village. I've been here, you know, forever. So it's in my interest to make sure that the people that get it and do the right thing by it. And I think you've only got to look at, as Peter said earlier, reference what Autograph have done, that would happen. I can't guarantee that it would be Autograph, but certainly they are very interested in the site. It's also something very personal when you do this sort of thing. You know, it's land that I've owned for a long time, and it's something that needs to be done properly. So I do feel that the planning, the way we've gone about it with regards to being outlined, gives a little bit more actual positivity to a developer, to give them a little bit more scope to put their own print on it. If you go and ask Autograph, it really was a question of changing a few things that they didn't like with regards to what Ashford had done, but they had to go back to planning, and they had to get, you know, it all passed through with regards to the bricks they built it in, the stone they built it in, the tiles they used, all has to go through the reserve matters, which is then done through the council, and believe me, it has to be absolutely correct.
Thanks, Andy. Councillor Barbie Lundad, District Councillor, wants to raise an issue now.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I was wanting to wait until there were any parishioners who had raised points, but seeing as there aren't any other hands up, and my question more or less follows on from Linda's concern about the issues with outline planning consent and the commitment. I hear what Simon has said, I hear what Andy has said. So putting that to one side, Simon started off by saying that there's a lot of technical information. And as a Green Party councillor, I'm sure people won't be surprised that I'm looking to see what there might be in terms of energy design. And I suggest that there's actually very little certainty or commitment to that. There can be no doubt in anyone's mind anymore that there is a climate emergency. And I've mentioned to Andy on 2 or 3 occasions over the last 7 or 8 months that this development could be an opportunity for air or ground source heat pumps to be installed. From 2025, it will no longer be possible for new developments to install gas boilers. So just in terms of the design and access statement, if I refer to page 25, where it talks about low energy design at 4.11, there seems to be almost no commitment whatsoever. There's very little detail. It is all couched in the language that suggests there's an opportunity to develop sustainable housing with low energy. It says individual houses are south-facing. It means that things could happen. Solar panels could be installed. And then it lists guidelines for sustainable building designs, but it does offer no commitment that any of the guidelines will be abided by. And I rather think that that section offers us no confidence or comfort whatsoever in terms, there's a lovely picture of somebody standing outside a house where there's no heat loss. And, you know, I kind of get that, you know, mechanical ventilation, these are all great aspirations, but there doesn't seem to be any commitment to include any of this. And so I had looked forward to seeing something that was forward looking. And I have to say that I'm extremely disappointed. And I wondered if either Andy or Simon would like to say something about that.
I can start. Thank you. The answer is that it's very closely linked to the previous point. This is an outline application, so we haven't put in the detailed design of the houses, which means we haven't put in the detail of the energy performance of each of those houses. But that would obviously all follow at a reserve matters application stage. The commitment, I mean, there's no doubt the commitment is there, the commitment there from us and for Andy. The reason we don't need to spell it out is because we know that it's an absolute policy requirement of Mendip District Council, and also a requirement of building regulations if and when we ever get that far. So there's no doubt that that all of those measures would simply have to be, they're not optional, they would all have to be incorporated. And as you say, if that means ground source heat pumps, solar panels, we know there won't be gas. So, you know, we have to, or the developer will have to come up with a series of measures in order to ensure that he complies with the building regulations at the time, which are only getting more and more stringent as every year passes.
With the reserved matters as well, though, they would be able to put that in. The developer would put that in, or we would be able to. The council would make sure that within the reserved matters there were certain stringent rules they would have to abide by. Is that correct? Because of the regulations that are in.
Yes.
I suggest, though, Barbie, that because boilers. I know what Autograph have done. They know that, so they have some of the houses on the church farm site have got different energy saving detail within, and they were spec'd for certain people to go the whole hog. There's some with solar panels on now, and some have got all sorts of stuff. I don't know what they are, but within them, so that I've been talking to James Bacon about. So again, I think it would come down to getting the right to developer, and that again does a bit of the onus comes back to us when we're selling, and the commitment we can get from a developer when he actually puts his reserve matters in, or will put his reserve matters in.
Peter, I'd like to just respond, if I may.
But we're not.
Sorry, if you have.
Yeah, sorry,
Andy, if you finish, when you finish, let me know.
Sorry. But we're not. As Simon said, we're not going to be building the houses, but Mendip will, within their guidelines, will make sure that gets, but what degree it goes to, again, would depend on how stringent Mendip want to be with the reserve matters.
Well, I would like to suggest to any parishioners who are listening to this that this offers very little comfort in terms of low energy design. Yes, any development, any house has to abide, any new building has to abide by building regs. They lost some of the things that might be aspirational and which I would just hope that any new development might have the foresight to put in. They're not required at the moment. And I would have liked to have seen something a little more visionary, I think. And I understand about the outline stuff and all the things that you say, Simon, but I think nonetheless, it's a disappointing design and access statement with regard to that. Even to have put aspirations in would have been some, I don't know what you could have put in. I understand what you're saying, Simon, but I wouldn't take any comfort from this if I was a resident of Road.
I think,
my apologies.
Simon, a marker has hopefully been very forcibly put down by Barbie. Our own parish council finally agreed to declare a climate emergency. So perhaps should this application go forward and be approved, should it, then perhaps that could be an issue to be discussed with any prospective builder. And it's not a matter of conforming to Mendip regulations that Barbie's asking for. She's asking for more of a showcase and to make it a marketing strength of the properties being developed and eventually sold, that they should be at the forefront of sustainability. So take that away with you. You can't say any more at this stage, but take it away with you and bear it in mind. Dave Jupp, you've got a thumbs up, which is perhaps more to do with my performance than anything else.
No, I do apologise, Peter. It's going to the mute button and getting going. Some years ago, the Parish Council spent an awful lot of time on a neighbourhood plan. And this is the second landowner, sorry, Andy, but you're the second landowner that just doesn't want to accept a democratic vote from this village in 2017. It didn't want Barboursfield and didn't want Murfield, other than some possible bungalows at Murfield. Yet you still persist. So there's no little respect for us villagers, as I see it, on that front. No response? Anyone respond?
Well, I don't. It's never been a. I don't know what I'm supposed to say, David. This is about the planning application that's in, and the planning application is in, and we're following the national planning forum. So the field has been it's not just something that's come along. It's been out there for a very long time. I've not just come up with this since it was way before the neighbourhood plan. I've been looking at doing getting that field into planning, and for probably 20 years I've said this. I have said this before, and I think it fits with where you would put houses when housing is needed, and that's what everybody's angling, or the general country is angling at. And primary villages, again, need to survive, and we've been through all this. And so I put the application in with Simon because it's always been on the agenda, and it's suitable to, in my opinion, along with Brown's Ground, to make that something that would survive without any houses on it, and it's filling in a natural area that would fill in and suitably take houses. So I don't really know what more to say than that.
I think I would just add, Andy, that the neighbourhood planning is a very contentious issue in this kind of sector. It creates a lot of false hope, in my view, amongst local residents and local communities who, spend a huge amount of time and invest weeks, months, years in preparing a neighbourhood plan. which at the end of the day it can only be a snapshot in time. You know, it's like the local plan. Everything has to move forward. Everything has to be reviewed. The data that the neighbourhood plan relied upon, well, I mean, we questioned it at the time. We could go into that again. There's no point. But the point is that data is at least 5 years old. The local plan, Mendip's local plan.
Yes, we're not muted. We're not muted.
What, am I wrong about the data?
No. John was.
Yeah.
You carry on.
So the data is old, and you know there were children who might have been 17 who are now 23 and wanting a house. You know, time moves on, and the same applies on a district basis. But, you know, that's why the local plan has to be reviewed every 5 years, because if we stand still, and if we don't, and if the next neighbourhood plan proposes no houses as well, what happens? The village will die on its feet. And now maybe that's what a lot of people want, and I don't blame anybody for that. But it isn't a sustainable way forward, in my view.
It's not a sustainable way forward either. Keeping building big housing settlements. You could quite easily do some infill with smaller homes to give people a chance to get on that ladder. But unfortunately, what you're pushing forward won't be anything for youngsters. We've just seen that. You've just said that about the old farmyard, Church Farm.
Well, there are youngsters. There are youngsters up there, though, David. There are, and they want to start a family.
All right.
but
okay, then. Second question on your planning application. We'll move on. The entrance onto Church Lane. All the traffic's going to come through the village. Very interesting on your transport company, whoever done it, and the review and the traffic that pulls out at Road Bell. Firstly, 14 turn right and only 3 go left. I think they might have that the wrong way round, because there's not even 14 houses between your brothers and the Bell Inn. Just to add to it, do you realise Titch, when he goes to work, doesn't go to the Bell, he drives through the village. And I don't blame him, because no one can get out of the Bell turning right. So it would be nice, some of those details were a little bit thin, and I'm sure the county, well, actually Somerset County will fall in the line and accept it. But again, it's just some of the stuff that's in there is so on the edge. I'm sure the people at the Bell who are on screen tonight would agree. So I think that's a little bit iffy as well. For everything then to come through the village to access to other than Trowbridge or Bradford, will be coming down Church Lane, Longnuts Lane, or down to the High Street that way, and departing left or right. 150 vehicles, isn't it? You think it's going to be on that site?
Yeah, go on, Simon.
Well, I was just going to say that the transport assessment, it's one of those areas I referred to at the beginning. You know, I'm not a transport engineer. That's why we employ experts to do that, and the analysis and interrogation of their work has to be done by people who are similarly qualified. All I can say is that there are standard methodologies for undertaking this type of assessment, and the standard and the traffic modelling and all the rest of it is done in a manner which is entirely, consistent with best practice, guidance, all the rest of it. Now, in the end, if Somerset County Council or anybody else who's suitably qualified can pick holes in it, then have a go. But it's not for me to say. I can't defend it. I can't do anything other than, I'm afraid, refer you back to that report and to the Somerset County Council, who'll do. Blimey. I mean, I wouldn't be quite so dismissive of their attention to detail on all matters highways. It will be given a proper grilling, and quite rightly too.
Simon, just to say that sometimes in practice and in theory, what looks good in theory from a desk and a few numbers on a machine compared to what actually happens in this village practically That's why I state that the bell doesn't get used for going to the A361 or to get to the A36, not by the majority.
Peter Barnes, you've had your hand up for a while.
Hello, thank you very much. My question is that if the planning application is successful, at what stage is the general layout of Brown's ground decided, and the area of the allotments and the area planted for trees, the play areas and the position of paths?
That would all come forward again with the detail of the housing scheme as part of the reserve matters. So those reserve matters include all of the detail of the open space as much as they do the detail of the housing.
With regards to the open space, as in Brown's ground, the plan was or is, Peter, to sign that to the parish council. So the parish council would be able to do with Brown's ground basically with what they would like. Really, we've set an outline. There is a need for 11 or 12, I think, or 11 allotments. So in the scheme we put in 12 because they fit quite nicely. And again, it was an indication of what people wanted, so it's in there. But it would the layout and what would go into Brown's ground, if I'm correct, Simon, would be down to the parish council once they have the ownership of it. And they could plant trees or could be orchard, as I said. I've done a bit of looking at trying to have an idea or two that would not cost the village, because I've had that question asked of me. It would be a burden to the village, maybe, to take on what would be nearly 7 acres. But it could be tied in that the developer would then pay for the trees and the construction of the allotments and the water that is needed to get to the allotments, and paths that would be put in if people wanted paths to get around it. That was in, I think we said that right from day one, but it would go to the parish council and they would do with it what they would like, but in perpetuity. So it stays as the open space and has trees to whatever regard the trees are. It could be anything really, I suppose, depending on what people would like. But obviously the cost is difficult to try and get across to people that actually, if it was a certain type of tree, it might actually be a burden to the village in the cost part of it. So it would be up to the village what they would do with it. But there are ways of making that field earn and sorting into the drainage, when it's been worked. So I've ploughed it and I've put maize in it. That's all going to go back to grass anyway because of the rotation within the farm. And that will make a massive difference to the water runoff of that site. But 150 willow trees would also create a massive bonus to sorting the drainage of the area out, because that's what a willow does basically. Same with apple trees, but apple trees, orchards, which I know a lot of people love the idea of the orchard, which is great, but that will be down to the village and could be laid out to exactly what the PC would like.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Could I just add that it would the timing of that will all, of course, and inevitably be linked with the first thing the developer is going to do is to sit down with the parish council when he's putting his detailed plans together, to sit down with the parish council and say, what do you actually want in this land, given the clear intent in terms of the ultimate ownership of it. So there will be another very clear and strong engagement in relation to the detail of precisely what's on there, the management regime, and all all those related matters.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Gary's messaged me to say he needs to leave. So if everybody would just indulge Gary and invite him to be the next person to raise a question, you need to unmute yourself. Gary.
Yeah, apologies to Simon for my lack of understanding of technical issues, but just to pick up on the issue of the traffic, there was something that I saw some time ago on possibly the original map, talking about access points to the left-hand turn or a right-hand turn in and out of the site or part of the site. Could you throw any more light on that? I heard what you said about the detail of that would be down to Somerset, etc., and other people, but could you just explain how you would see the traffic flow in and out of the site, both in terms of during construction and afterwards? And you may well see me disappear from the screen, because I'm getting looks from downstairs for various reasons. I can get the answers, whatever the answers was, from someone else report of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. I can't see you, but not that that really matters. But yeah, I think probably what you're referring to was the discussion we had about Clay Lane and whether quite what happens to that. And that is something that we're still very open-minded about it, as to how this access into this development site relates to Clay Lane, and whether, for example, that's I know it's one way at the moment, but whether it's blocked off, whether it's made one way, whether we restrict access to or from this site via Clay Lane, which clearly makes sense, and quite how all that works. We've put a design into the application, but that's something we will be talking to Somerset County Council, and of course we'll continue to talk to the Parish Council about it. And if anybody's got any particular thoughts on that, that's it's a good example of the sort of thing I was said right at the beginning. That kind of engagement is almost impossible to have with the County Council before an application is submitted. So I think that's what you're talking about.
Well, yes, it was. Okay, so the answer is we don't know. Okay, I understand, but we don't know. But one thing I would say, just to go back to what Mr. Jupp said, the reality of how it doesn't matter how many cars it is, never mind lorries. I'm particularly concerned about lorries getting in and out through the village. If that was the case, the reality is there'll be an awful lot of traffic, regardless of how many turn right and how many turn left, going through the village. If you're coming from Bath, you will come through the village. If you're going to Bath, you will go through the village. If you're going to, as Dave points out, a lot of people don't like turning right onto that main road. There will be a lot of traffic coming down there, which frankly, in reality, just isn't sustainable with the infrastructure that we've got. And you know, what you're saying, as I understand, is actually, yeah, well, that's up to the county council to look at. That is my biggest concern, is the traffic coming through the village, and I just want to register that, really. I repeat, you said that's up to the professionals to sort out. Fair enough. At least I've understood that actually you can't answer it.
Well, all I could add to that is that it's not uncommon to have traffic routing agreements and different provisions to deal with construction traffic, and that's something we're quite happy to look at. And that of course could be bound into the to any permission.
Okay, fine. I am now literally being dragged out the room, so thank you for that.
Sounds exciting.
As Simon was saying, Peter, it might be helpful that if people did have views on Clay Lane, that would help, Simon, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Nicola, you've been very patient.
Hi, it's Dave. Good evening. Just an observation. It recently came out that new houses built quite recently, even in the last year or two, could expect a bill of over 20,000 to retrofit them to bring into line with new regulations. Just coming up to the Barbara Field, I think, echoing what Barbie said, the fact that houses or the aspirations of not having solar panels, water harvesting, heat to air pumps, e-charging stations as standard, I think is sad to hear. And it's just the analogy I would like to say, maybe because I know Andy wants to leave a legacy to the village, that future people can say, like, these are a standard house we should be having. Everybody should be living in. It should be a standard. I look over at Church Farm development and I don't see any solar panels. I see chimneys, very 19th and 20th century, but I don't see any solar panels, which I see sad in a sense. And I suppose the analogy I'd like to make is, you're not going to bring a combine harvester into the field with 1980 technology. You're using a 21st century combine harvester to do a 21st century job. And we live in 21st century houses that have as close as possible to passive standard. It's not something for debate. It should be. Do it at the start. And it needs to be done from the very beginning, not put in as an aspiration. I think that needs to be made very, very clear. And if you could do that from the very beginning, Andy.
It'll be cheaper as well.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, Dave. And again, I think in a minute, you will in a minute. I know that Nick Spicer, with regards to his energy company, have done an installation within that development. But I agree. I've got solar all over my yard, and it seemed like a really sensible thing to do. But it's to impose that on developers is going to be done to a degree within what will happen in their what they have to stick to when they come to put their reserve matters in, and the guidance they will be given. What I think you're saying is that we need to then, when I come to sell, if it was to go through, then the people I pick need to be of a standard that will do that sort of thing. I understand it. I get it. It's just that we are not the people that build them. We can only put forward as much as we can, and it's generally through, from what Barbie said, from what you said, and it makes perfect sense to do, or to try as hard as we can to get them to do and take up and make the right decisions on what they do with these houses. I will try and get James Bacon from Autograph to give me some details of what they've done on some of the houses, because they are able to spec those houses when somebody buys it, to provide that level of I suppose customization to the house. So I'll take that on. I take that on board. Both of us, it is perfectly sensible to look at that stuff, and we've done it. I've got a biomass boiler, and I've got solar on the roof. So,
I think I agree, Andy. I think perhaps we have been a bit complacent's not the right word, but we haven't expressed ourselves very well in relation to this. Neither of us are looking to duck it. We both want to fully embrace it, and I think if we could add some clarity to the application to explain that would be no bad thing. And I'd love to see all of that across the scheme, and I'd happily sign up to it. What we can't do is be too prescriptive today, because it's such a fast moving world. But the principles are all there, and I think we should write something down and make a further submission in that respect to ensure that the scheme will not just meet the requirements, but perhaps go beyond that.
Yeah, and I think anybody listening, I think we could and we should, like Simon says, try somehow. It might be a new way of doing it, because developers, we impose, or maybe we come up with the ideas and maybe we put it in front of the council that this is what we want. It certainly worked with bungalows on on the church farm site, because I was categorically told in a very hot room with Simon and Mendit and my lawyer it was a very hot room, but I was told that I didn't need to put bungalows in by Mendit. And yet I had orders, if you like, from the village. I had guaranteed that there will be bungalows in that site. And there are bungalows going in that site. So I did have a bit of clout there, and there's no reason why Simon and I can't take it one little bit further with regards to the greenness. And if we're both in agreement, you've got it on record that we will make sure that we can get some of that taken on board.
Yeah.
That's very encouraging. Thank you very much for that, and for people who've raised the issue.
Yeah.
Becky Small. Can you unmute yourself, Becky?
Yeah, Becky, hi, Peter, everyone. It's Alex, actually, with Becky.
Hello.
I just have a quick question, actually, Peter, to the more to the parish council, actually, from what you said at the start, Peter, in terms of, you mentioned with the application for the mead that you were seeking a request to await the appeal hearing outcome from the inspector's hearing. And I just wondered whether you could confirm at this stage, Peter, whether you were likely or intending to propose to do the same for this development. No,
and I recognise that Simon is more expert in this area than I am, albeit I did spend 6 days talking and listening to the inspector when the hearings were taking place. My understanding with the mead is that because it was a site put forward in response to the inspector's interim ruling, that, as I understand it, a decision on the mead is held up until the inspector writes his report. I think that we might see something early next month. Again, Simon might know more about that than I do. But in all probability, that report will not be finalised and a decision finalised, as I understand it, until April or even May, because if he changes his guidelines that he came up with previously, then that will have to be put out to consultation. Whereas, as I understand it, and again, I defer to Simon being an expert in the area, this application is a standalone application which has been put forward to Mendip Planning Board, who don't have to pay any attention to the inspector. Simon, would you like to say whether that's true or not, or accurate or not?
Yeah, I certainly your assessment of the situation with the inspector's report that's as good as I know as well. It's all got very, very convoluted and delayed, which is a pity. I didn't know that there was some kind of diktat that the mead application should be held in abeyance pending the outcome or publication of the next stage of the inspector's report, but it's perfectly possible and it makes sense. Our application would be treated in exactly the same way, I would expect. I mean, the fact is we're a month or so or two behind, aren't we? In practice, I think we'll probably have the inspector's report probably in its final form before this is determined. So, in effect, we're both in the same place.
Okay. So, just on that, when we've been given an extension in relation to Barbara's Brown's Ground to respond by March the 9th. Do you have a view then when Mendip Planning Board might look at your application or consider your application? I mean normally it's
it's normally 12-13 weeks minimum. Right. That's the determination period for major application. So right. So it won't be until Easter, and of late things obviously you know, nothing's going faster than normal. Everything's going a bit slower. So yeah, I always frustrated by those timelines that are given to parish councils and local residents. They're always, every local authority does it. They give everybody 3 weeks to apply, and everybody goes mad saying, how on earth are we going to read all that in 3 weeks? Well, I wouldn't worry about it. Any comments you make will be taken into account, or can be taken into account, all the way up to the point where the committee decide the application. And of course, you can go along and you can speak at the committee as well. So obviously, you know, get something in if you want to get something in, whether it's for or against, but you can send it in any time.
Okay, thank you, Simon. There are no hands up at the moment. I've been sent a question, and I know it's an issue that we've had discussions with Andy previously, and it's to do with the buffer zone between the properties on Bradford Road and on Barbara's Field. Question is said, who will own the the zone if the proposed development goes ahead, and who will be responsible for maintaining it, and what right will the residents on either side of the zone have to enforce that responsibility? There is a concern that the buffer zone, unless there is a clear delineated line of responsibility, could end up in brambles and be so. I don't know whether Andy or Simon can respond on that.
Yeah, I think we discussed this in the playing field actually, because it seemed like a good idea to leave a buffer zone. But the reason why it's there, it's going to hopefully give a bit of flexibility to where that line can go. So as I see it, and Simon can butt in if I'm saying it incorrectly, but we don't want in any shape or form land to be left in no man's land and not looked after. So it could be sold to the developer to give extra garden space to the plots that are on for the new development, or it could also be then asked if the resident on or who abuts it could also or may also want to acquire that bit of land. It was something that gives a bit of flexibility. It could go, or could be allowed to, or we could let the landowner from Bradford Road take it on as a bit of extra garden, or it could be dealt into the package with the developer. So it's just the reason why it's inside the line, inside slightly to give that buffer zone, is it gives a bit of flexibility to the developer, or to us to sell it to the developer, or it's perfectly acceptable if the landowner from Bradford Ground want a bit of extra garden. We can go either way. I think, Simon, that's a bit of a long-winded way of saying it.
And that way we ensure that the perfectly good point which has been raised doesn't happen, because that's not in anyone's interest. So we make sure that the back garden of the property on Bradford Road ends at the same fence or hedge line as the back garden of the new house on Barbara's Field. Precisely where that line is, as Andy said, that could be, it could be where it is now, or if there's a desire to extend the garden a little bit, then that could be done. But yeah, nobody wants any no man's land. It will be clearly defined.
Okay, thank you. Another question which has been sent in to me. It relates to the heavy clay nature of Brown's Ground, which Andy Fussell, Andy Pickett, Jim McAuliffe, Elaine Butler and I walked over in the middle of a storm, and so we saw it possibly at its worst. There's a concern that when we put allotments in there and footpaths, if assuming the development were to go ahead, that they would become a quagmire very quickly. And it's been suggested that there would be a need for agricultural drains. I'm not sure personally what an agricultural drain is, but perhaps this is a question to the farmer. What's your comment on that?
Yeah, it is. That was a particularly good day to have a look at it, Peter, wasn't it? And there is, you know, it is not into grass any longer, but as I said, it will be going back to grass this time. That will make a massive difference. It's the fact that we've taken heavy machinery over it and we've planted a crop in there and turned it over so it's actually soil, and then it's been hit down hard by machines, and the soil tends to get, when it does get full of water, saturated, the water will run off. So it is particularly bad at the moment. If you looked at Simon's bit, which was further down, which is in grass, the other side of the fence that's partitioned that field, when we went down, all of us went down there, there was actually very restricted amount of water coming off the field because the grass and everything it holds it up, and it sits and drain and doesn't go anywhere, but it doesn't necessarily drain, but it holds it long enough to be absorbed. So the best thing to do is to put it back into grass, which that is obviously the plan. B, will agricultural drainage help? Yes, it would, but to put drainage in like that, it's got to go somewhere. So you then have to pipe it to a different pipe, to take it to another pipe, to take it out onto the road, or take it into a culvert. It's complicated. It's highly expensive. Trees, again, as we said earlier, trees would play an awfully big part in reducing that water burden because they obviously drink a lot of water. They have a root system. And willow, for instance, is grown on the Somerset levels purely because it's grown in saturated land and does particularly well when you're coppicing it. And the other feature is I don't think, with regards to the allotments, that it will cause a problem. I actually think in work in the ground, in small plots, yes, where people walk up and down would get very muddy, no doubt about it, as every bit of ground would at this time. There isn't anywhere that wouldn't get muddy with constant, the footpaths, you know, we've got all sorts of trouble with footpaths being quagmired up at the moment. But it'll go back to grass anyway. So that's one, and we didn't have necessarily this exaggerated, but we've had a lot of rain as well, don't forget, but we didn't have this exaggerated problem when it was in grass, and quite long grass, not short grass, but quite long, permanent pasture tends to deal with that. So if it goes back to grass and it was to have trees in, whether it be willow or orchard or what have you, I think you would that would be sorted out pretty much instantly.
Okay, and we have a question from Robin, I think. It probably is going to be the last question. It's 9:05. Robin.
I've got three comments to make
right.
from listening to what Simon had to say earlier. The first one is about Clay Lane and what to do about Clay Lane. And it is a two-way lane. It's not a one-way lane. So that's one thing that needs to be sorted. Residents have an option of going either way. It's got no entry down the east side, so entry can't come in from Sportsman. But once you're in there, it's a two-way system. So that needs to be taken into account. If we, what we would like as residents of Clay Lane, and it would be a good discussion point, is to put access only at the west side of Clay Lane, and therefore only access only for, qualifies for everything. It just allow people to deliver parcels to residents of Clay Lane. It would allow the refuse to come through, and it would, if that wasn't that's the first step really. So if that didn't really work, we could think of other options. But the first option is just put an access only sign up, as simple as that, and we'll play it from there. Secondly, Simon, my property hasn't. I've looked at the plans again with Mendit while you've been talking. My property is not included as a listed building on your application. There's two listed buildings. One's at Church Lane, one's the old rectory. My property's missing. So I'll put that back to you again, that this heritage site here has not been included in your report. And finally, your actual map, your plan of the site is incorrect. And so the buffer zone you're talking about with Clay Lane, Clay Fields, I should say, is actually on their property. It's not in your site. So you need to get your map right, because that map you're showing is about 30 years old. And since then, Clayfields have acquired a lot of land that you're showing as being part of your site. Well, in fact, they're not. And Barbara would actually would qualify that if she was here to say so, but she's obviously not. So there's three things there where you've got your facts wrong, and it needs sorting. Thank you.
Just very quickly, Robin. The first point about access only to Clay Lane is a good one, and exactly the sort of comment we will be looking for, and the sort of solution, in fact, which we were identifying. The issue with access only, of course, is it doesn't stop access. So there's the question whether there needs to go a little bit further to actually make it difficult for people to drive down there. So that's clearly that's well on our radar already. I'm looking at the heritage assessment. I've got it in front of me. Item number 16, Clay Lane House. There's a plan with a dot on it right on top of your house. So it's in there. You're looking in the wrong place. And thirdly, that piece.
Forward that to me, Simon.
Sorry?
Is it possible that you could forward that to me? Because I would be
of course it is. I think I've got your email address. I can send it on to you. Absolutely fine. So it is in there. And thirdly, you're absolutely right. We made a mistake with the red line, and that's been corrected. If you look on Mendip's website, it's correct now.
Right.
It was spotted. It was spotted, I think, day before yesterday, or yesterday. I think it was spotted. So
yeah, I can't.
And I, I know that obviously very well, Robin. So it was drawn badly.
Yeah, I know how Barbara acquired it, and I understand it took a lot of legal work to sort it out when they wanted to sell. So yeah,
it was actually we've always known that. It's just that the consultant that drew it, that actually put the line round, just for some reason he just didn't pick it up at all. And I was sent that to look at, and I didn't spot it either. It was just one of those things, because I've lived here, I suppose. You just assume, but no, it was fundamentally wrong. So Simon addressed it pretty much instantly, and it is where it should be now.
Right.
But well spotted.
Okay, so I'm going to draw this meeting to a close. I thank everybody for the manner in which they've handled it. I've had one email saying it was a bit disappointed there wasn't a bit more spirit in the meeting, but this was a briefing meeting. This was about seeking facts and challenging information, and thank you for the manner in which it's been carried out. I think particularly Barbie Lund made a very powerful pitch, which was then subsequently supported and would be supported by the Parish Council, about a sustainable energy system being put into the houses. That's clearly been taken on board. Where we go from here, I'm sure there will be continuing discussions with the Parish Council and also with residents, with Andy and Simon. But the next Parish Council meeting is on Tuesday. We've got a very full agenda. And so we're not going to devote much time at that meeting to this planning application, but we are going to have a meeting a week on Thursday, a public meeting, which is going to be heavily promoted yet again on Facebook, where everyone is going to be invited to attend, and there will be an opportunity, and there will be the capability for people to express their views. I appreciate we're going to get a lot of hostile views to this development. That's nothing unusual, and they're entirely legitimate. And so we need to hear them. We need to hear what the issues are. And if there is any comeback on that or any clarification that the parish council can provide, then that will be done. Parish councillors themselves are somewhat restricted. We've got 2 parish councillors who, because they essentially live adjacent to this development, very unfortunately can't actually take an active part in the council discussions. Particularly unfortunate because both of them are extremely capable people. But that is the ruling we've had from the monitoring officer. Parish councillors themselves probably will have to be very careful what they say at the public meeting on Thursday, because really they should be reserving their position until the special parish council meeting, which will take place on a week on Tuesday, March the 9th. It will be open to the public, but obviously would be for a discussion amongst parish councillors for them to determine the stance that they wish to take in relation to this application. So we've got 2 more meetings, one on about this issue, one on March the 4th, one on March the 9th. We have a parish council meeting on March the 2nd, but as I say, we're not going to devote much time to this issue at the parish council meeting, because we've got 2 special meetings solely and exclusively devoted to this issue. Finally, I'd like to thank Andy Fussell and Simon Steele Perkins for sticking with us for the hour and 45 minutes. Also to thank, I think, 40 people sticking with us for an hour and 45 minutes. That shows the concern and the interest in the village. I don't think anybody had a lot of doubt about the level of interest, but thank you very much for sticking with it, and I hope you've found it useful. If Steve Isles is still on the line, I do notice that Sheffield United at the time was winning 1-0 against Manchester United.
Peter, how do I put you on the mute?
Thanks, Steve. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, and have a good whatever's left of the evening. Thank you very much for joining it.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Well done, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. Cheers.